Hello everybody, JGC Anime here, and today we are going to be reviewing The Genius Prince's Guide to Raising a Nation Out of Debt, or as I like to refer to it as, Genius Prince. This is a series that I actually wasn't too sure about going into, but it actually sounded quite appealing, so I decided I would give it a look. So here I am to kind of describe my thoughts on it. I ended up just finishing it yesterday because I took some time off from watching it because I was waiting for all the episodes to come out, and then I just never got to it for a while. But yeah, today we are going to be talking about that. And without further ado, let's just get right into this. So, what is the story summary of this series? The story focuses on our main character, Wayne, who, despite acting like a strong, intelligent prince, he's actually someone who wants to be a lazy bum and wants to just live a quiet life in like the countryside. However, he wants to be able to sell off the kingdom for money before that point and aims to try to, help it grow enough so he can leave. However, every single time he tries to do something, it always leads to him being too successful, and then he cannot actually leave the station like he wished. And yeah, it's basically kind of the premise of the show. It's basically just a really smart prince who just happens to have way too much luck on his side, so his plans go way better than he wants them to. And yeah, that's kind of it for the story summary. So what do I like and dislike? I actually really like the comedy in this series. It's really funny seeing how Wayne just has all these plans going on in his head where he's clearly a genius in the story. However, he's such a genius that the world ends up working in his favor. Like in the first storyline, something he plans out, he thinks is going to go one way, but it turns out everyone else that he's thinking about is so incompetent. Like his enemies are so incompetent that his plans end up working too well that he ends up just completely just being overly successful. And just the comedy of that is nice because it's not repetitive. It's not like Komi-san where they do it every single episode. Usually there's something set up, they build it up, and then they end it. But they don't have to do it every single episode. And they actually take the time to build up each storyline and show off how smart Wayne actually is. Honestly, Wayne is probably one of my favorite protagonists in a while. He's a lot of fun, and his whole personality is just really entertaining to watch, where he's a bit whiny, but he's not whiny enough to the point like Fruit of Evolution levels of whiny that I just can't stand the protagonist. He actually is only whiny a little bit by bit, but he mostly keeps on a face that keeps him very interesting. And the rest of the characters are honestly pretty good too. Honestly, Nanim is probably my favorite character in this other than Wayne. She's very fun to be around how she interacts with Wayne. There's other characters like Falanya, Wayne's sister. That's her. Loamina, I think that's how it's pronounced again. I'm just reading off the wiki here since I can't remember almost anyone other than Wayne and Nanim name-wise. And there's a bunch of other characters that I can't really describe too much about since that'd be going too far into the spoiler territory, so just kind of saying what I like and dislike. There aren't really that many bad things about this series I can say. I had a very good time watching. I can't say I ever had an episode I genuinely disliked. The only time that was close was when I was trying to watch one episode, but the translations were off. They weren't off, but they were oddly timed. And because I was watching this in Japanese, and it was just weird because half the time the dialogue didn't match up with the what they were saying because it was a little bit ahead. So that one episode, I think it was episode 3 or 4, definitely made it harder to watch, but that was just at the time. I'm pretty sure it's fixed by this point. And honestly, I don't think there was anything bad I can really say about this show. The characters are interesting, and overall, other than the final storyline, which is a bit I honestly really enjoyed almost all of this whole thing. I really enjoyed it. Some spoiler-free thoughts would probably be that I found some of the ideas behind Wayne and what he can do to be a bit confusing. Sometimes it's those levels of character skill from Ayano Koji in Classroom of the Elite where they do something insanely incredible and then you're just wait, how did they do that? And then they try to explain it, which it makes sense, but at the same time it doesn't. And it's kind of like that with Wayne. Only difference is that unlike Ayano Koji, he tends to have a more energetic personality. But I can't talk much about Ayano Koji because I'm not doing a Classroom of the Elite review. So who knows? I might do that in the future. Season 2 was on its way, so I might. But all in all, I didn't think there were any major issues with this series. I had a fun time, and up till like the last storyline, which is kind of meh in comparison to the others, I liked it. I really liked this series. It wasn't some like god tier series that had some big epic stuff that couldn't be replicated, but it had some nice moments, and I liked those. That's all I can really say without spoiling too much. So here is a timestamp to when the spoiler section, because we're about to enter the spoiler section, comes to an end. If you have seen the series, I recommend sticking around, hearing a few of my spoilerish thoughts. But if you haven't, you should skip to the end to hear my final thoughts. So yeah, without further ado, let's just hop right to the spoiler section after I count down from 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so what do I mean when I didn't like the final storyline? Basically, it's kind of like the others where Wayne gets set up for something and then he has to figure a way out of it. And it was just not that interesting. Like, it was kind of like after Wayne managed to outsmart some people, he now gets invited to some kind of meal with a king who secretly is trying to like mess with Wayne, but it all goes crazy when Wayne decides to bluff an enemy and all that, yada yada. I can't really say too much because honestly I myself don't remember all the details. There's a lot of political talk in this series, but oddly enough, despite all the political talk, which normally I find quite boring, both this show and Slime have managed to make that type of stuff to be generally quite interesting. I think this show did a good job of explaining it, even if I didn't understand everything everyone was saying. There were a few characters I can't think much of, like the characters Fish, and I think that's her name, or Fish, I don't know, and Nanaki, which are some side characters who generally don't make that much of an appearance in the show. They're there here and there, but they don't really do anything. Nanaki technically does do something, however, it's not anything more than just like 1 or 2 tasks from Wayne. Although I do kind of like the lore behind Nanaki and Nanim's like backstory. Like, they're apparently a race that I can't remember the name of right now, but they're like a race that people thought of as less human, which intrigued me because I was wondering maybe we would dive into that further in the storyline, but now it's apparently they're just discriminated against, which again, trying to hold back on discrimination and trying to show that you should have respect for all types of people, whether their eyes are different or their hair is different or their skin is different. It's a very interesting idea, and I think they handled it quite well, even though I do think that it could have been delved into a little bit more. It still wasn't terrible, and I kind of liked it. Another thing I wasn't too sure about was this is something I definitely wasn't sure about, was like the kind of romance setup in this series. Like, it seems like Wayne is kind of getting set up with a harem of girls, but he seems to only really care about Nanim. So it's weird, but I do like the fact of how much Wayne clearly cares about Nanim, because there's literally this whole thing where Wayne is talking with a guy, and he plans to just walk out of there after declining an offer. However, then the guy says, "Oh, by the way, could you let us hunt down those beasts?" Basically referring to Nanim and her people as beasts. And rather than just excusing himself from the room, Wayne's just like, "You know what? You said that. Let me kill you now." This is kind of like a little bit of a repetitive thing where whenever someone insults Nanim, Wayne immediately just goes into like crazy intelligent mode and tries to just destroy his enemies. Which honestly, I love that a lot. And it shows that despite Wayne always complaining about how he wants to just be done with the kingdom and settle it off and stuff, he genuinely is, like, he's quite an intelligent individual. He's very clever, and it's so funny seeing how everything plays out. I remember watching the first episode, and it was just really funny how Wayne was just like, "Oh, we're gonna lose to these guys, so they'll surrender and I can just go off and live a peaceful life." But then they end up winning because Wayne unintentionally thought too much of the enemy, and that ended up giving him the victory. And it's just this like repetitive joke throughout the series, which I'm surprised it never got old to me. It actually was quite funny throughout, where Wayne just is trying to give himself a peaceful life, but it never works out because, life doesn't apparently think of him as worth giving a rest. He's always put into these new scenarios, and it's funny because it will make him seem more and more like a legend as time goes on, even though he himself doesn't want that. He just wants to relax. He just wants a peaceful life, and it's just a very funny thing where I enjoyed this series. I'm not afraid to admit, I liked it. I very much enjoyed it, and while I did have some issues here and there, I can't say there were any moments in particular that I genuinely thought were mediocre. Well, mediocre in the sense of like I didn't like them at all. Mediocre isn't like, they were fine, it was a thing, but I can't think of anything I really hated. I thought most of the storylines were quite clever, and I honestly really enjoyed this show. So we're at the conclusion of this video, and what are my final thoughts? I liked this show. I found it to be a fairly enjoyable show that I'd happily watch again with someone or by myself. I am perfectly cool with that, and I would recommend to watch at least once if you're a fan of like more advanced genius type plots where the main character knows what they're doing and you know they're going to come out on top because they are incredibly clever. It's a very well made idea, and honestly, I can't say that I genuinely hate anything from the series. I like almost all of it, and I find a lot of it to be very, very entertaining, and that's why I give Genius Prince an 8 out of 10. Very solid, very good. Could have some better animation at points, but overall, it was definitely a series worth checking out, and I highly recommend it. And yeah, that's all I really have to say. Thank you all for watching. If you're new to the JGC Anime channel, don't forget to subscribe. I always welcome new anime fans to the channel, and I even try to get these reviews out weekly. So yeah, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all around. Peace!